The Stone Age man hunted and gathered food from place to place. Over time, they left their natural abodes, the caves, and built permanent houses. They also learned to cultivate land and grow crop. Soon they began to produce more than what they could consume. And that is how the concept of bartering and trading came about. To transport goods to near and far, they built bullock carts and ships. As their lives became more organized, they had more leisure time to develop other skills. And thus the foundation of a civilization was laid. Men built their own houses with mud, stones, bricks, wood. Water being essential, they built houses on the riverbanks. Many rivers have great stories to tell about great civilizations that flourished on their banks. Men don't live long enough to share their experiences, but the ruins of their houses, their art, and other remains tell us about them. Today, we will tell you the story of Harappan civilization that once flourished in the Indian subcontinent around 5,000 years ago. How old is our civilization? The apple Raju is eating is 3 months old. Raju is 7 years old. The tree is about 100 summers old, but the civilization that developed here is about 5,000 years old, and it began around 3300 BC. But how can we know how old a civilization is? Several lost cities are hidden in the many layers of our soil. The deeper the layer, the older the civilization is. In order to find and study ancient civilizations, archaeologists carry out excavations by digging through the many layers using specific instruments and techniques. But how does one find out how old a piece of pot is? Initially, the topsoil is removed by a spade. There are many layers of soil beneath our feet. Each layer represents a particular time period, so the objects found in different layers date back to different time periods depending on the layer they were found on. Several places were excavated over the years by different teams of archaeologists, leading to the discovery of many Harappan sites. As we know, all the sites excavated did not belong to the same period. Archaeologists have classified the different time periods as early, mature, and late Harappan period. Most of the sites discovered were mainly on the banks of the river Indus or Sindhu, Ravi, Saraswati, and Ghaggar. The sites covered vast areas from Sutka Gendor on the Makran coast to Alamgirpur in Uttar Pradesh, from Manda in Jammu Kashmir to Daimabad in Maharashtra. Archaeologists prefer to call it the Harappa civilization, as Harappa was the first site to be discovered. The extent of the civilization is so vast that it would be difficult to take you everywhere. But let's visit two important sites, one from India and one from Pakistan. First, let's go to Lothal, a city in Gujarat where the Harappans had built a dockyard. Lothal was one of the important trade centers of Harappan civilization. When Lothal was excavated, several interesting objects were found which included a large number of seals. What were these seals used for, and who used them? Traders used seals to establish ownership of their goods by making an impression of the seal on their product, just like logos identify various products today. Before exporting, the goods were weighed with standard measures of weight. The weights were made of stone. Small weights were used for weighing precious metals, while the larger weights were for bigger items. Just as goods and objects from Lothal were exported to other places, traders brought back goods from faraway places like Mesopotamia and Egypt to Lothal. A tiny terracotta head found in Lothal came from Sumeria, which is in present-day Iraq. And a terracotta model of a mummy came all the way from Egypt. This proves that the Harappans carried out trade with nations across land and sea. This seal tells us that mariners might have carried birds which helped them to find the direction of land. Now, from the port city of Lothal, let us go to Mohenjo-daro, where the seal was found. Mohenjo-daro, now in Pakistan, lies in ruins. But once it was a bustling, populous city, fortified with citadels and towers, and divided into two separate parts: an upper town for the nobles and a lower town for the common folk. One of the well-known structures of the upper town was the Great Bath. It resembled a modern swimming pool. It had 6 entrances, a huge central bathing pool, galleries, dressing rooms, and 8 small bathrooms. Archaeologists believe that the swimming pool was waterproof. They also believe that it was only used for religious ceremonies. Now you may wonder where all the water came from. The water was filled in from the well, and it was drained out through little tunnels in the floor. As we walk through the upper town, we see other amazing structures. One of them is a big granary. The sheer size of the granary leads us to believe that they had a huge surplus of grain. More grains meant more wealth, as they could trade the excess. Grains were stored in these huge storage jars. To the south of the granary were these circular brick platforms that may have been used for threshing the grains. Let us go across to the lower town. The lower town, which was home to common people, was located on a lower level. It was here that the artisans worked, making pottery vessels, beads, toys and jewelry. We can still walk down the main streets that run straight down the city. with narrow lanes that branch out at right angles. The houses opened into the smaller lanes to keep out noise and dust from the main streets. The entrance of each house was big enough to let a cart enter. Each house had a well and a bathing room. This reflects not just their high standard of living, but also a high level of awareness about hygiene and sanitation. In fact, their sanitation systems were so refined that they had perforated pots that retained solid waste and allowed only liquid waste to enter the covered external drain. It is indeed remarkable that their drainage system was designed to prevent leaks, water clogging, and mix-up of solid and liquid waste. The Harappans were good at town planning too. The roads were made of hard weatherproof brick, and to avoid litter on the streets, each street had a dustbin. It is unfortunate that in the 21st century there are still many towns and villages that do not have access to even the most basic sanitation facilities. And yet, 5,000 years ago, there existed a civilization that had the expertise and the vision to provide their people with all these amenities. We have woken up to the advantages of rainwater harvesting only recently, whereas the Harappans practiced it 5,000 years ago. We can see an example of this at the site of Dholavira in Kutch, where the Harappans had created huge water reservoirs. Excavated statues of men and women provide answers to other questions we might have. For example, what did the Harappans look like? How did they dress? Both men and women seem to have taken pride in how they looked, just like we feel today. This statue is known as the Priest King. He is wearing a shawl with a trefoil pattern. Such patterns were associated with religious symbols in Mesopotamia and Sumer, leading archaeologists to believe that he could be a priest. His meditative eyes also support his theory. Notice his short beard and long hair tied behind with a ribbon or fillet. This statue is known as Mother Goddess. A striking similarity can be seen in the dressing of Mother Goddess and this present-day tribal woman. Both seem to have wrapped a cloth around the hips. Instead of an upper garment, they have adorned themselves with ornaments. Jewelry made from terracotta, semi-precious stones, gold, silver and shells were excavated. Some practices remain more or less unchanged over thousands of years, like making beads for necklaces. We visited a bead maker of Khambat in Gujarat, which was an active trade center in Harappan times. We observed the process involved in the polishing of beads, and we found that it must have been quite similar to the methods a bead maker must have employed 5,000 years ago. Since clay was available in plenty, most of their utensils were made of clay. After the objects were made, they were baked in order to strengthen them. Baked clay is called terracotta. Terracotta objects have been found in plenty during excavations, as terracotta does not perish as fast as other materials. A very experienced craftsman is demonstrating the process of making a pot for us. Another legacy left behind for us by our Harappan forefathers. By now, you must be wondering, what about children in those times? What did they do? Did they have any toys to play? Yes, indeed. They had creative and attractive toys made mostly out of clay, as it was easily available. All these were made of terracotta, but there was something that wasn't. This tiny image, which is popularly known as dancing girl, is a rare object as it was made of bronze. So now we know that the Harappans had a good knowledge of metallurgy and metal casting. Language is one of the key indicators of a progressive civilization. Inscriptions on seals, perhaps suggesting the name of the seal's owner, tell us that the Harappans had developed a written script. Unfortunately, scholars have not yet been able to decipher the script, and so we do not know what the inscriptions say. What happened to the civilization? Scholars prefer to trace the decline of the Harappan civilization to multiple causes like external invasions, massive flooding, climatic changes, and wearing out of the landscape through overuse. Today, many thousands of years later, do we share connections with the once flourishing Harappan civilization? Our basic town planning, the use of covered drains. We find similarities in jewelry designs. Bangles on the dancing girl jingles even today. The making of pottery has changed little over millennia. The excavations at the Harappan sites have not stopped. New objects are being found, new sites unearthed, new studies try to decipher their script. With each new discovery, we learn a little more about our ancestors and about ourselves.